And there's just like a line on it. And it's like, I can even like explain it. But it's
all right. Let's get started. So, raise your hand if you're brand new. All right, so those are all the new kids, so the rest of you get to know those folks, okay? Let me go ahead and find out who is here. So, of the new folks, let's see, okay, Chase. All right. And, let's see, Mr. Schneider. Okay, Mr. Moran. Yeah, we got you. You're
Brian D'Souza.
D'Souza, okay. All right, anybody else I missed? That's it? Oh. Juanita. Yeah, Bernal. Okay, got it. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. So, a couple of little quick things. On your desk, obviously, for those of you that are not new, they did some renovations over the holidays. That's the reason the desk has been all sort of shipped over. But the nice thing is, we finally have power on the desk. So no more extension cords everywhere, doing everything. All right. But it makes it a little bit more interpersonal. All right. So what we're going to do first, go over a couple of quick little things in the syllabus. I made a couple of minor modifications since I sent it to you, and when I say minor, they were pretty much minor. So you obviously have access to the most current version if you get into like WebStar or to SharkLink, whatever, so that you can access the most current version. But like I said, it didn't really change much. Obviously the classroom changed from 1133 to 3030, which obviously if you made it here, you know where we are. Okay, so the parts that did change a little bit. So today we do not have a guest speaker, but next week we do. Okay, so that was one minor little change. Doesn't change the quizzes or anything like that, but just from the standpoint of the schedule, those of you that were counting on a guest speaker today, well, too bad, so sad. It's going to happen next week. All right. Now, let's kind of go over the grading structure. For those of you that are brand new, this is going to be kind of a little bit of a foreign concept to you. For those of you that have been in one of my classes before, you kind of understand how this works. So basically what we do, each class session, we will go over a chapter or over a handout, and then as soon as we finish with that, now you get to take notes, use your computer, use your book, but as soon as we finish that, then we'll take a little quiz. And the quiz in this class are 15 questions, all right? And it covers the material that we just covered, okay? Now, for those of you that have had me before, you can testify that sometimes the quizzes are really easy, sometimes not so much, okay? And so it definitely, you know, is one of those sorts of things that you need to be paying attention, you need to be taking notes to be able to be prepared to take that quiz. Now, in the event that you don't do well on the quiz, immediately, you know, after we've gone over the material and you've got all your notes there in front of you and everything, you get a second chance. And the second chance is test, in this case, test number 1, which occurs a couple of weeks from now. And then that will cover basically handout number 1, handout number 2, and chapter 11. All right? And so taking that test can replace all 3 of those quiz grades. Does that make sense? Okay, so for example, if you got quiz number 1 and you made a 60, quiz number 2, you made an 80, and quiz number 3, you made a 70, an average of 70, all right? But then if you take the test and you make an 80 on the test, then that wipes out all 3 of those quiz grades, and now you've got an 80. Does that make sense? But the caveat is, with the test, it's closed book, closed notes, closed computer, okay? So that is part of the motivation for you to obviously take great notes and to be prepared to take the quizzes whenever they're offered. Otherwise, you're going to spend a little bit more time studying and preparing for the actual test. Okay, does that make sense, everybody? Now, in this course, we also have a third chance. Okay, if you take a look at the very end, on the very last day, we have an optional comprehensive final. And then that can replace one of the two tests, okay? So each of the tests in this class is worth 45% of your grade, okay? So in essence, you're going to have a third chance to prove that you've mastered the material. Is everybody clued in with that? And it will also be a closed book, closed notes, closed computer sort of an exam. Okay, everybody good? Yep.
So if we do really well in the quizzes, are the tests also optional?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Little do they know, right? Okay. Now, let's talk about the other quick little things that we've got embedded here. All right. Let's see. Okay, so in terms of the grading structure, once again, kind of, as I mentioned here, the items 3 and 4, as you can see, you can do quiz 1, quiz 2, quiz 3, or test number 1, quiz 4, quiz 5, quiz 6, or test number 2, and then the optional comprehensive final will replace the lowest test grade. Okay, now the remainder of your grade is 10%, okay, which is kind of really one of those things that just kind of, if you're on the margin, it can potentially boost you up or potentially boost you down depending on the problems that you may encounter there. But we're going to have a little spreadsheet presentation toward the end of the semester, and then also a couple of little case studies. We're not really going to talk about those until we get much deeper into the semester, okay? No reason to clutter your mind with that right now, okay? All right, any questions? Now, in terms of the textbook, what I put in the syllabus is you can pretty much buy or get almost any version of this. You can get a really old version because, believe it or not, this stuff really doesn't change that much, okay? Time value of money is time value of money, okay, for the most part, okay? So, you know, an edition that's 10, 15 years old, there's going to be a little bit of difference, but whatever differences there are, we'll talk about that in class. You don't need to really worry about them in terms of the book. The book is really meant to be a reference for yourself. All right, so that if you want to kind of go in, you want to dig a little bit deeper than maybe what we covered in class, that sort of thing, that's what it's there for, okay? Another thing that I mentioned in one of the emails that I sent out to you is we have a YouTube channel, okay? Is everybody taking a look at that? Yes? Okay? All right, on the YouTube channel, you can go in, and obviously we're recording the class today. So as soon as class is over today, what I do is I just pop that video up on YouTube, and then you can start watching it as soon as tomorrow, all right? So that in the event that you're like, oh, I got really confused when I was going over this particular topic, go back, look at it, review it, hopefully prepare, you know, yourself a little bit better. But the other thing that you can do that I mentioned in the email is to look back at past semesters. So if you're somebody coming in and you've never seen any of this stuff before, and you want to get a little bit of a head start, okay, then you can look at the videos from last year because the material really doesn't change that much from semester to semester, okay? Once again, kind of time value of money is time value of money, all right? So you can look at those videos and then kind of prep yourself coming into class. All right, now you're going to see it once before you come into class, and you're going to see it again once you're here, okay? So my point with saying all of this is there are multiple ways to adequately prepare yourself for the class. Now the other thing that I would suggest, and one of the things that's been offered, is Ryan Kaufman back here on the back row. Raise your hand, Ryan. For those people that new people don't know you. Ryan is our graduate assistant, also enrolled in the class. Ryan has offered for tutoring services for time value of money, so those of you that are struggling with that or kind of just, you know, this is a relatively new thing for you, and he'll make himself available to help you out with some tutoring in addition to whatever, you know, I can do to help you out. I'll leave anything out?
There's some testimonials, anyone who's taken one, who's got tutored before. No? You're fine? Okay.
No testimonials from anybody? Okay. All right. In that case, let's go ahead and move forward. All right. Any other questions on the syllabus, organization, that sort of stuff? All right, good. All right, let's just go ahead and jump on in. So what I did, and this course, just to kind of give you the perspective, for those of you that have taken the real estate finance course that I taught back in the fall semester, that course is all about debt, okay? It's all about loans, it's all about basically lenders and lender yields and that sort of thing. This class is all about equity, okay? It's basically about the people who are putting money into the projects and how they go about getting money out of the projects and calculating their rates of return and that sort of thing. Okay, does that make sense for kind of a distinction between the two? Okay, so with this course, what I start off with is kind of just at least a review of some of the basic sort of time value of money, calculator usage, that sort of thing. So for some of you, this is going to be a complete 100% review of what we did last semester. But what I do is actually use some different materials. I borrow some things from CCIM that actually puts the material in a little bit of a different format and a little bit of a different approach. So those of you that maybe didn't quite get onto it and catch on to it maybe the first time around in the finance course, hopefully you can catch on to it now. And those of you that are brand new, this hopefully should be a good preparation for you kind of moving forward. Now, for those of you that are brand new and sort of saying, oh my God, am I jumping into this sort of midstream and am I going to be behind because of not having taken that? No, because each class stands independently of every other class, okay? So I pretty much expect that you really don't know a whole lot coming into this course, all right? But saying that, having taken this course and then coming into the fall semester taking the real estate finance course, you're going to be much more prepared. Okay, so it's kind of like regardless of which one you do first, there's enough overlap there in terms of the calculator usage and that sort of thing that it should be fairly straightforward. Okay, we'll get started here in just a second. But one other little thing, I gave you a couple of handouts on your desk. Just once again, one of them is kind of the class roster. So this is, at least as of this morning, who is enrolled in which courses in the program, and their email addresses and that sort of thing. So you can kind of look through that at your leisure, but it's a good way for you to also, as you're maybe developing study groups and things like that, which I would highly recommend for this class, that you probably look around and start thinking about who are some folks that I might want to meet up with on a regular basis, maybe once a week. Kind of go over some of the calculations and that sort of thing. So be thinking about this way, at least you have a way of getting in touch with them. The other is it's a little brochure that the realtors put out and they send to us once a year, but it's actually kind of interesting that the cover story deals with this whole thing of using storage containers for housing. And for those of you that have been in the program for a while, you remember that a couple semesters ago, one of the groups did their development presentation using containers as housing or a form of housing. So it's kind of interesting that that would be brought to light here in this particular little journal. So take a look at that at your leisure. Okay, let's jump in. All right, any questions before we okay, next thing, calculators. Does everybody have their calculator? Anybody not have a calculator? Because I brought some extras. Right, how could you not bring one?
I was relying on you last semester. I would have bought one if you would have told me day one.
Okay.
You gotta walk away.
Great way to set an example.
Yeah,
I'm saying I need it less than other people, is what I'm saying.
Oh, you put it all in your head. Okay, anybody else?
I just wanted to calculate.
Okay, anybody else? Everybody else has a calculator. Okay.
Where's Mo? I miss Mo.
Okay. So, let's just sort of start off, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of work through this sort of sequentially, just from the standpoint of making sure that you kind of follow along. So, and I'm not going to be reading from it, I'm just going to be kind of writing down a couple of quick little things, but I would say go to page 313 if you've got it printed out. If you don't have it printed out, hopefully you've got an electronic version. I did bring 2 copies that I printed out just in case somebody didn't have it electronically or didn't have it.
So during the quizzes, are we allowed to use a computer?
Yes.
And so we expected to print these out, or it's just one of the
I
other?
think you ought to print them out, but
There's
that's
gonna
up to you.
I didn't go through the whole, is there like multiple, I know we got 2 for now.
That's it.
That's it?
The whole semester. Okay? Does anybody really need one? Okay.
We're not supposed to read these minutes.
Oh, yeah, we got them. Okay.
No, I was just, there's more of a question.
Oh, okay. All right. Any people? Okay. Well, ideally, yes. Okay. I'm sorry? Yeah, there were 3 number 4. Okay, well, you're number 3 is already done. Okay, once again, we're taking a look at handout number 3. Okay, once again, you can have it either online or obviously, yeah, the investment analysis tools. Okay? Now, basically go to page 313, and you'll sort of figure out what I'm doing here. But basically, this first example is about compounding a single amount to a future value. This is just the terminology that they're using, but it's a good framework to kind of keep it focused and that sort of thing. Okay, so what we're doing here with this particular kind of problem is we're saying, all right, we've got a lump sum dollar amount, a fixed dollar amount that we want to invest. And we want to invest it for some particular period of time, and we want to, at some particular interest rate, and we want to find out how much that is worth at some point in the future, okay? So that's the general setup. Now, for the calculator, we'll do a quickie little introduction for those of you that have never used the financial calculator before. So let's just sort of start off with the basics of the clear all function. All right, if you look on the calculator, on the bottom sort of left-hand side, you've got an orange button. That's the shift key. And that's what anytime that I write down this little sort of black box, I'm referring to that orange shift key. And then right below that, you have the C, or clear key. But underneath the C, you will see in orange, see all, clear all. All right? So what that does is the clear button by itself just clears out what is in the display, whereas the clear all clears out everything that's in the memory registers for previous problems that maybe you were working on, you know, either earlier in the day or, quite frankly, you could have had your calculator turned off since last semester. Whatever the last problem you were working on last semester is still in there, okay? So that's why you use the clear all function, to make sure that you clear everything out, all right? Another quick little thing to sort of point out is to set the number of compounding periods, which we'll talk about here in a second. Okay? If you want annual compounding, which means once a year, you're going to put 1, hit the shift key, and then up on the top row of the calculator, underneath the PV or present value key, this is when my eyesight is really bad. All right, underneath the PMT key is P/year, okay? And that just simply means the number of payments per year, all right? So most of the problems that we're going to be dealing with are going to be either annual or monthly, which means 12 payments per year. Because pretty much everything that we do in real estate, you're going to get either like an annual income or annual expenses, or you're going to get monthly expenses or monthly income. All right? Now, there are other number of compounding periods or payments per year that can be used, but in real estate, those are the two that we primarily use. Now, in finance, you may have where you have weekly payments, you may have biannual or semi-annual payments, a couple of times a year. You could have daily compounding, 365 days a year. You could have continuous compounding, which is basically like 999 payments per year. But for our purposes, we're really just limiting ourselves to these two. Now, in order to find out what your calculator is currently set for in terms of the number of compounding periods, simply hit that shift key and then the clear all. And then in your display, it should say 1p year or 12p year. Okay, everybody see that? Okay, so all that's doing is just making sure your calculator is set up correctly. Okay, now let's just jump into a quick little problem. All right, so in this case, we're going to be looking at a situation of where we have a dollar amount that we're going to invest here at time period 0 currently. And we're going to invest that at some sort of an interest rate or some sort of a period of time, and we want to know how much that's going to be worth at that future date. Okay? So that's just kind of the visual setup. All right, so in this case, give me a number, dollar amount. $100,000. All right, so $100,000 is what we're going to invest. All right, at what interest rate? 6%. All right, and for how many years or how many months?
5 years.
5 years. Okay. All right, so what we're going to be solving for here is what is that going to be worth at the end of that 5 years. All right, so to do it on the calculator, pretty straightforward. Every time you start a problem, just to make sure everything is good to go, always start with the clear all function, okay? Just to make sure everything is set correctly. Then, for this problem, since we're doing this as an annual problem, then you're going to put in the 1 shift payments per year, all right? Then, we're going to put in 100,000, and then you're going to use the change sign key, okay? And that is over on the left-hand side of the calculator, 4th key down. It has the plus/minus. So all that does is change that 10,000 to a negative number, and we're going to make that the present value. In other words, what it is worth today. Okay? Everybody with me? All right? Then, we're going to skip down and put the interest rate in. So we're just going to put in 6%, and then hit the interest rate key, which is on the top row of the calculator, 2nd key over, okay? All right, once you've got that, then we're going to put in the term for 5 years, and in this case, we'll put in 5, and we're going to put shift in. Now, the reason I do this, you'll find out a little bit later, if you go ahead and put shift in, even though it's 1 payment per year, it just keeps you from making mistakes whenever you start getting into monthly compounding. So what this shift does here is it's basically saying, take that 5, multiply it by the number of compounding periods. So in this case, it's 5 times 1, so it's 5. Okay? But if this had been 12 compounding periods, or monthly, it would have been 5 times 12, or 60 months. Does that make sense? Okay? Now, so once you've got all of this in, very straightforward, we simply solve for future value. All right? Yep.
I don't understand. So I followed you to the 100,000, and then when you went to the 6, like, how do I click that? Like, what?
Okay, you're just typing in the 6, and then on the top row of the calculator is the interest key function, I divided by year. Okay? And then after that, 5, and then hitting that gold shift key, and then N, which is on the upper left-hand corner of the calculator. Okay? And then solve for future values. So let's see what we get. Okay, overachievers. All right, let's see. All right, 133,822.56. Okay, everybody getting that? Okay, who's not getting it?
I don't even understand how these articulate with each other. Like, I'm clicking things, but like, I don't understand how you're making them go to the future value or like.
It's not a regular calculator.
It's not a regular, yeah.
Don't even think about it. There's no equal. Don't even worry about that.
You want?
I learned the hard way.
Clear off.
That's why there's 2.
You guys all getting an answer? Then 100,000 plus or minus present value.
And I'm not used to this. I'm
Okay.
used to it. Yeah.
Everybody else good?
E2.
Yes? Okay. All right. So, very simply, we have achieved the goal of calculating a single amount or compounding a single amount to a future value. All right, let's work another example. All right, or let me give you another setup. Same kind of problem, but in this case, let's make it monthly. All right, and the dollar amounts we're going to give you. All right, once again, let's have you shout them out, okay? Give me a present value amount.
230,000.
500,000,
There we go.
okay? What sort of interest rate?
6%.
We said 6%.
did.
7.5.
8.9.
There we go. 8.9. All right. 7.5% interest rate. All right. And then the term. How many years?
30.
30 years. But this is going to be monthly. So that is going to be 360 months. Okay. And then we're going to be solving for the future value. Okay.
401k top.
All right, everybody good in terms of the setup. All right, so let's see if you can do it on your own, and then I'll run through it here real quick.
What was that? What noise did you just make?
Okay, so there's the setup. Just like before, except now we're doing this on a monthly basis in terms of the compounding. So 12 payments per year. Okay, we clear everything out just to make sure that we get it set up correctly on 12 payments per year, and also get rid of anything that was in there from the previous problem. Then we're simply putting in 500,000, change the sign to make it a negative, and then present value. 7.5 as the interest rate. 30 shift in, which will then pop up in your display automatically, 360, just indicating that it is adjusting for the monthly compounding. And then once you've done that, then all you're going to do is hit the future value to solve for the answer.
So N is always like a yearly, like even though it's 360 months, we still just do the 30 years for N.
So that's the reason why it's a shift in, because this is assuming, yes, 30 years and then times 12 compounding periods would make it a total of 360 periods or payments.
Gotcha.
Okay? All right, so let's see what we get. All right, so in this case, 4,710,766.95. Okay? Everybody good? Okay? All right. Let's do one more, just for good measure. Okay, do we want this one to be monthly or annual? Annual. Okay, I heard annual.
Pushing it back.
Okay, and we'll draw our little graph again. All right, so what do we want our present value to be? 1.2 million. Okay, all right, what do we want our interest rate to be?
8.9%.
8.9%. Okay, all right, and the term, how many years? 15 years. Okay, and then we're going to be solving for, once again, our future value. All right, so the setup, 1 payment per year. Okay, clear everything out just to make sure everything's good to go. And then 1,200,000, change the sign. We'll talk about that here in a second. As the present value. 8.9 as our interest rate. 15 years as our term. Solve for future value. Okay, now, let's go ahead and do that, and then I want to explain a couple of quick little things. end up with 4,311,212.63. Okay? All right. Now, let me kind of come back over here and go over a couple of little fundamentals just for those folks that are brand new. Okay, the way to think about every single one of these problems is we're ultimately going to be solving for something. Okay? Whatever it is we're solving for, that is the last step in the process, or the last button you push, however you want to sort of look at it. All right? But these first three variables can be in any order. Okay? We could have just as easily put the 15-year term up here first. We could have put the 8.9% interest rate, first. We could have put the 1.2 million last. Okay? The order of these doesn't matter, because in essence what's really happening here is these numbers are just going into a formula, and then this is just simply the answer for that formula. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay? So most of these problems, so for those of you that are math phobic or number phobic or whatever, the thing that you have to try to wrap your head around is it's really not about the numbers, and it's not about pushing buttons on the calculator. It's about understanding the information that you're being given and understanding the logic, okay, that you've got to be able to then transfer kind of that word problem or that situation into, here are the variables that I've got, here's what I'm solving for. Now this is clearly, as everyone that has taken me before, can attest to, this is going to be the simplest problem you're probably going to see, okay? And then from here, it gets incrementally more complex, okay? And so there's going to be more logic, if you will, that you're going to have to employ to be able to understand kind of the flow of how these sort of are set up and how they work. The best way to get proficient at this is definitely practice, okay? Is to go through, like with these handouts specifically, these set it up as easily as it can possibly be set up, work through the examples, but the thing is, don't look at the answer before you have solved the problem, okay? Try to go through and struggle with it and then to see if you get the answer, okay? Because the worst mistake that you can make is trying to just sort of say, oh, well, the answer says it's supposed to be 15% or 5 million or whatever it is, and then you just work toward that answer. Don't do that. Try to work the problem independently and then come to the answer and try to make sure your answer obviously matches. Okay, moving forward. Any questions up to this point? All right. Okay, so that gets us to our first one. All right. That will go a little bit slower. All right, so if we kind of move forward, the next one at the bottom of that same page is compounding an annuity to a future value. Okay, first of all, first question. Those of you that are brand new to this stuff, what's an annuity? What is an annuity? Yeah, exactly. Okay, so an annuity is either you are making a fixed number of payments into something, like a bank account or a savings account, or you're receiving a fixed number of payments from maybe a retirement fund or from a savings account or from some sort of a distribution. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so that's all the word annuity means. All right, so in this case, the way we're going to sort of set this thing up, or the way to think about it, is as follows. So let's just start off. Give me an interest rate.
6.5.
6.5. Okay, give me a term. How many years or months?
10.
10 years. Okay, do we want that monthly or do we want it annual? Okay, we want it monthly, so that's going to actually be 120 months. Okay, 10 years, 120 months. All right, so what are we left with that we've got to provide? Okay, we've got to provide a payment, not a present value. And so each of these payments for each of these months, all the way to 120 months, we're going to be making let's say a deposit into an account that will ultimately yield us a future value. Okay, does that make sense, everybody? So it's like a savings account that you're putting money aside every month, and then at some point you want a big lump sum for like a retirement fund, or you're saving up money. And from a real estate perspective, you're setting up a reserve account. You're sort of saying, okay, we want to set aside a certain percentage of the income off of the property each month, and that after a period of, in this case, 10 years, we may need to replace the roof. And we want to have enough money sitting in that reserve account to be able to then write a check for the roof. Does that make sense? Okay, so in this case, we said this is going to be monthly, so 12 payments per year. Okay, pull everything out. Now, in this case, we'll go ahead and just put in the interest rate first. Doesn't really matter what order we put these in. So 6.5% is our interest rate. 10 years is our term. But in this case, as you will see when you put that in, it should pop up in the display 120, because it's converting it from 10 years monthly compounding or monthly payments for 120 months. All right? Then we've got to determine how much are we going to set aside. Well, we never determined that. Okay? So how much do we want to put aside each month? $2,500 a month. Okay? So what that's basically going to be is every single month, we would basically be depositing $2,500 a month for 120 months. Is everybody with me on that? Now, just to kind of get your brain wrapped around it a little bit, $2,500 a month times 120 months would be $300,000. Okay? Just the simple math that everybody can understand, not dealing with time value of money. All right? So at a minimum, we know we're going to have $300,000 sitting in that account. But we're going to have much more than that, because we're going to be earning 6.5% interest every single time we make a deposit, compounded interest, over that 10-year period. But let's go ahead and put in the $2,500. Again, $2,500, change the sign, and now we're going to be putting that in as a payment. Okay, on the top row of the calculator, fourth key over is the payment function. Okay, and so that is simply allowing us now to put that money in as a deposit. All right, and the final step is to simply solve for future value. But let me come back here just real quick to explain something. The reason why I have this sort of timeline set up here, and they use T accounts and that sort of thing, I think, in your handout, but it's the same general concept. The idea is that anything below the line is a check or a dollar amount that we are spending, okay, that we're writing as the person that we're, from our perspective. All right, anything above the line is money that we would be receiving at some point or at any point. All right, and then obviously the time period is simply dictated by what period of time are we looking at, how many years, how many months, that sort of thing. And then up here, we're just simply writing the interest rate to let us know what we're sort of dealing with. Okay, Chase, you have a question?
Yeah, so when it comes to compounding interest, like because this one's monthly, is there any distinctions in terms of whether it gets compounded on a monthly basis versus if it gets compounded on like a yearly basis?
Yes, because we have set the calculator up for the 12 payments per year, it's automatically compounding it monthly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, is that always, again, like I don't really know the context of like all the real estate, is that always true? Like just because I'm making monthly payments, am I always getting monthly interest, or are there times?
It's an excellent question. So it depends, kind of from an accounting perspective, when you're realizing that income. All right. So the question is, well, okay, is it always going to be the case where it's going to be like we're going to be compounding this monthly and that sort of thing? So in many cases, when you look at an income statement for a real estate property, most of the time it's going to be an annual number, okay, an annual income. And so what actually takes place in most instances is whatever monthly income has been derived from the rents simply gets rolled up into an annual number and then put there on the income statement as this is our annual income, okay? But if we were looking at it from an investment perspective, where we are legitimately depositing that money every single month into a bank account and it's earning interest with monthly compounding, then we definitely would need to make that adjustment. Okay? Okay. So, let's see what we get. All right, 421,007.89. Okay, everybody good with that? Yep.
Does it ever change throughout the period of those?
Yes. Okay, so the question is, could the interest rate change over time? Yes, that would make it a more complicated problem, which we can do. Okay. No, right now, but yes, so you could very easily. Yeah, everybody's going. Okay. No, but yes. So what we can do is, we literally could say, every single month, every single year, we could change that interest rate that you're earning on the deposits, and then reflect that, obviously, in what the ultimate future value is going to be. So, simple answer is yes.
You got that, yes.
All right, so once again, just a quick comparison if you were sort of paying attention earlier. All right, so 300,000 would have been the net deposits that we would have been putting in, exclusive of any sort of interest. Whereas because of that 6.5% compounded interest, we actually are ending up with $421,000 in that account, or the value of this asset, whatever it is, at the end of that 10-year period. So basically $121,000 worth of interest. Okay, make sense? Any questions? Okay, moving forward. All right, let's do one more of these. Okay, we want the next one to be monthly or annual? You want it to be annual, okay. All right, so this is going to be annual, so one payment per year. Clear everything out. All right, so let's set it up. Okay, how many years?
17.
17 years. Okay, all right, and what's the interest rate we're going to use? 5%. Okay, and what is going to be the annual payment that we're going to make each year? Or deposit that we're going to make?
25,000.
25,000. Okay. This is annually. Okay. So once again, let's just start with the simple math. 25,000 each year being deposited for 17 years will be 425,000 as the actual dollar amount deposited. Okay, everybody cool with that? Okay, now when we go back over here, set this up in the time value of money sort of format. All right, so we start off with, we put our interest rate in at 5%. Our term, 17, shift in. Now, here's the thing, shortcut, yes, you can just simply put in 17 in, and that would be fine because it's annual compounding. But as I said earlier, I go ahead and still put that shift in there, even whenever it's annual, just because you want to get in the habit of doing so, okay? And those of you that have had me before for class, you would probably bob your head and agree with me, yes? Yes, okay. All right. 25,000 is going to be the deposit, so change the sign on that as our payment amount. And then this now solve for future value. Okay, let's see what we get. Okay, $646,000 00916, okay? So once again, if you were sort of looking at that and trying to say, okay, well, how much interest did I earn? You know, a couple $100,000, okay? A little bit more, like 200 and what, 20-something thousand, okay? Make sense? All right, good. All right, let's move on. Okay, another sort of type. Starting on page 315, determining a sinking fund payment. Okay. So in this case, what are we doing? Figuring out the payment. So what is a sinking fund? It's like a reserve, okay? You're putting money aside for something. So in the previous problem, we were basically saying, okay, here's the money we're setting aside to get to a dollar amount. In this case, we're saying, if we need to get to this dollar amount, how much do we need to set aside? Does that make sense? Okay, so setting it up, let's sort of make sure everybody's clear. All right, so what we're trying to get to really is the future value, okay, to a certain extent. And so the future value in this case, we're going to say, give me a dollar amount. How much do we need to accumulate? 1 million? Is that what I heard? Okay, we need to raise $1 million, okay? Okay, how soon do we need to raise it? What's the time period? 10 years. Okay? And do we want to make this a monthly deposit that we're going to do, or monthly sinking fund, or do we want to make it annual?
Monthly.
Monthly. Okay, so we're going to start, and we're going to do this monthly, so that's going to be 120 months or 10 years. Okay? All right, and what interest rate do we want to have on this fund? 7%. Okay, so we've got everything we need. Now we just need to determine what is this magical payment amount that we need to come up with each month. All right, so in this case, we said this is going to be monthly, so 12 payments per year. All right, 7% we said was going to be our interest rate, but wouldn't clear everything out just to be safe. 7% is our interest rate. 10 years or 120 months. Our future value is going to be 1 million. And so our sinking fund payment, let's see. Okay, so what this is telling us is that each and every month we would have to deposit $5,777.51 every month for 10 years in order to accumulate $1 million in our account. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So once again, putting it in the real estate context, if we know we're going to have to do some major capital improvements to the property, 10 years from now, in terms of maybe putting on a new roof, putting in a new HVAC system, putting in a new carpet, doing a complete, retrofit of the property, this is simply telling us every single month we need to be setting aside that $5,700 and something in order, at the 7% interest, in order to have that money waiting for us when we get there. Now, part of the lesson here, this is a good sort of departure from just the calculations. We've talked a little bit about that whole concept of reserve requirements. Some lenders, whenever you get your permanent financing, your permanent loan on your property, will say, all right, every single month we need you to set aside X number of dollars or a certain percentage above and beyond your mortgage payment, and we're going to put that money into a reserve account. In some cases, it's interest bearing. In other cases, maybe not so much, depending on the circumstances. All right? But you're going to set that money aside, and the reason the lender is making you set that money aside is so that you don't have to come back to them at some point in the future and say, hey, by the way, I need a new roof, I need to replace my air conditioning system, I need to put new furnaces in, I need to do all this other stuff, give me another loan. Okay? They want to avoid that. Okay? And so that's why they will typically then put some sort of reserve in there for those sort of improvements, okay, or replacements or modifications, whatever they may be. But every lender is different. In some cases, some lenders, they don't care. Because their perspective is, okay, you borrowed this amount of money from me, we're going to obviously collect that amount every month, and if at some point in the future you do need extra money, we may or may not even be the source for it. It may be somebody totally different than us that you're going to want to get that money from, but we're just not going to bother ourselves with that. We're just simply going to assume that you're smart enough and bright enough to put that money aside and have it available when you need it. Okay? Make sense? Any questions?
If you don't use those kind of funds, can you transfer it to something else? Or
Yeah, I mean, like for example, let's make the assumption that you get a mortgage loan from this lender for 10 years, okay? And over that 10-year period, you don't spend any of this money you set aside.
Yes.
All right? At the end of 10 years, it's your money.
Okay.
You get it back. Okay? Now, hopefully, they did let you put it into an interest-bearing account or certificates of deposit or something to where you earned a little bit of money on it while it was sitting there. But you also have to sort of look at that, is that's an additional investment that you're really making in the property, so it's going to really affect your return if you're not able to pull that money out every single month and you're having to wait for it on sale or on reversion or at the end of the loan term. Yeah, right.
Is that similar to a bank escrowing your property taxes?
Yeah,
in
same
your
general
insurance?
concept. So like for example, if you get a mortgage loan for your house, in many cases, once again, some mortgages are what are called self-servicing, meaning that you, as the owner of the property, the homeowner, is responsible for every year coming up with your property taxes, coming up with your insurance payments, coming up with whatever other fees and charges have to be paid. But what lenders have learned is that many homeowners are completely irresponsible
I'll start from
with respect to keeping that sort of money set aside. And so what they do is say, okay, we're going to go ahead and collect that money every single month. So you're going to have your mortgage payment, but added to that mortgage payment is going to be a dollar amount for your property taxes and a dollar amount for your property insurance and whatever other fees and charges that they may want.
As it accrues throughout
As
the
it
year.
accrues. And so over the course of the year, ideally, there's going to be enough money in the amount that they've collected from you to pay your property taxes when they come due, pay your insurance when it comes due. And historically, there have been all kinds of legal issues in different parts of the country as to what the lender can do with it while it's sort of sitting there.
Floating?
Yeah, well, exactly. So that if you think about it like this is hypothetical. Let's say that January through December, they are collecting money for your property taxes, and they're paying those property taxes in December. Can the lender basically take that money, invest it in some other, thing, earn money on it, and then not really give you those earnings, but just simply apply the flat dollar amount that you have been basically charged? You follow?
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of weird little quirky things. I don't want to get into the weeds on that, but yeah, there's some real issues there with that sort of escrowing of funds. Okay?
So, based on this example, interest is actually being accrued on a monthly basis.
Correct.
So if interest then is accrued, let's say the bank changes this structure, interest then becomes accrued on a yearly basis, your payment amount is going to go up because now you're not accruing the interest monthly.
It's going to change, yes,
Okay.
it will change. But normally you're not going to have that sort of a switch, but yes, depending on whether it's compounded monthly or compounded annually or daily or quarterly or whatever, that will make a difference as to obviously how much you
How much
accrue.
it- okay.
Okay? All right, any questions? All right. Do we need to do another example of that, or are we good with that one? Okay, one more, all right. So we want this one to be monthly or annual? Okay? Okay, first of all, how many years? 30 years. Okay? And what's going to be our interest rate on this one? 5%. Okay? And what is the dollar amount that we want to accrue? What is going to be the future value? $350,000. Okay? All right. So now what we're going to be solving for is, well, what is going to be that monthly payment? All right? All right, so we start off with one payment per year. It's annual. Clear everything out. Put in $350,000 as our future value that we need to accumulate at the 5% interest rate for 30 years, compounded annually. So that's just simply 30 years, 30 payments. All right, and solve for what is that payment, that sinking fund payment that we need to make. Okay. All right, so the annual dollar amount that we would need to set aside for this to accumulate the $350,000 would be $5,000 a year, $5,268 to be precise. Okay, does that make sense, everybody? Okay, so if we set aside that money over the course of the year, and as long as we've got that money each December to be able to deposit, then we're good. Okay, any questions? Okay.
And that's escrow. That's an example of an escrow.
Yeah.
Account.
Yeah, it's just, once again, you're setting aside money into this account for some sort of future payment, payout.
Would that interest rate be the same as the interest rate of your loan?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, right?
No, in most cases, probably not. Because normally that accrual rate is going to be a lot less because, and think of it like this. The lender is charging you maybe, let's say, 7% on the mortgage, and you make a deposit into them, they're not going to be paying you 7%, they're going to be paying you maybe 2 or 3%. Okay? Because they've got to make money.
Of course.
Okay. All right. Let's move on forward. Okay. Page 319, discounting a single future amount to a present value. The pages in between, just in case you're wondering, are just worked out examples. Okay? Okay. Discounting a single future value to a present value. All right. All right, so in this case, what we are doing is we have a future value. We have a term, however many years, okay, and we have an interest rate. But what we're trying to solve for is how much is that worth today, okay? So let's just start off with kind of what we're sort of being given, all right? So give me a future value amount. $5 million. Okay, give me a term, number of years. 20 years. All right, 20 years. Okay, give me an interest rate.
5.
5%. Okay, so what we're saying, in real estate terms, we're saying theoretically, we have a property that we know for whatever reason, that we've got a contract, believe it or not, 20 years into the future, that someone will buy this property from us for $5 million, and we're saying, okay, assuming that the value increases by 5% a year, how much is it really worth today? Okay, so once again, we're doing this, looks like annual. So 1 payment per year. Weigh everything out. So 5 million is going to be our future value. Okay, 5% is going to be our interest rate. 20 years is going to be our term. And then it's going to be solving for present value. Okay, so in this case, it looks like the value of it today will be $1,884,447.41. Okay, is everybody good with that? So over that 20-year period, the property is going to double in value, or a little bit more than double in value. Okay, because of potentially the growth rate of 5%, which once again we could attribute to simply price appreciation due to a buoyant market. Okay, it'd be wonderful to have a 20-year run at 5%. I think every realtor in town would love that. Every investor would love that. Okay, not going to happen, but you know, we'd like to dream big. Okay, so any questions on that? Okay, that's pretty straightforward. We'll probably move on.
I do have a question on that, if it's okay. What is how would you even use that if you? I mean, you can't predict that this.
No, that probably was not the best of examples. What you're really just sort of saying, it would probably be better to do it on a much shorter period of time in a realistic example, is to simply say, okay, I agree to buy your property, 2 years from now or 5 years from now, whenever the lease is up on the property or whatever it might be, and then you're trying to figure out, well, what that really means in today's dollars.
I see. For my own kind of education, so I'll know what to expect.
Yeah.
Some years down the road. However long down the road.
I'm sorry? Yeah, and also sort of valuing potentially an option contract if you're trying to sort of figure out what the value is at some point in the future, but also coming back to the present and saying, okay, how much potentially should I be willing to pay for it now? Okay? All right.
Or whether it's worth to buy it now at a certain price.
Yes.
Down the road.
Okay, moving on. That one's pretty straightforward. We can probably jump to the next type of example, discounting an annuity to a present value. Okay, this is on page 320, 3.2, 3.20. Okay, so in this case, what we've got is, okay, let's just sort of start off with, number one, what's going to be our term? How many years or months? 15 years, okay? Do we want this monthly or annual? Monthly. Okay, so 15 times 12 would be 180 months. Okay, 15 years, all right. Now, what we want to know is what is the present value, but we want to know the present value of money that we are potentially going to either pay or receive. Okay, so in this case, let's just say that we're going to be receiving money, all right, in terms of rent that we're going to receive each month over 180 months. All right, so the setup is going to be as follows: 12 payments per year. Everything out. 15 shift in for 180 months, all right? And so what interest rate are we gonna use? 3% is gonna be our interest rate or discount rate, so we'll put that in. Okay, and so now what we've got to determine two things. What we're solving for is going to be the present value of the annuity, but we've got to figure out, well, what was the annuity going to be? So in other words, what are the rent payments that maybe we're going to receive over the next 15 years every single month?
$10,000.
$10,000 a month, okay? I like the way you think. All right, so $10,000 a month as our payment. That's going to be income to us, okay? So we're going to make that a positive number. Then we're simply going to solve for the present value of that. Now, before we do that, just once again, make sure in your brain, you know, that you see the connection here. All right, if we're receiving $10,000 a month for 180 months, okay, we'll be at 1.8 million, okay? Now, here's the thing, and this is where you're going to understand the logic. What you're going to find, whenever you solve for this, it's going to be it's going to be less than 1.8 million, okay, not greater than. And the reason it's going to be less than 1.8 million is because we're saying that we're receiving this money into the future, and because we're receiving it into the future, it's not worth as much to us as it is today. And so the further out into the future that it exists, the less it's worth to us. So in other words, just a simple question. If I ask you, do you want me to give you $10,000 today, or do you want me to give you $10,000 5 years from now, what would you prefer? Today. Because there's all kinds of risks that are embedded in us waiting 5 years to make that sort of payment, okay? You know, I could die, you know, we could have, a situation where I don't have the money. Obviously, over that time period, you could have been doing something else with that money that's productive. So there's a whole litany of reasons as to why that $10,000 in the future is not worth as much as it is today. Well, the question is, how much are we discounting it to reflect that sort of risk, if you will? Well, in this case, we're discounting it at 3% each and every year, compounded monthly. Does that make sense conceptually? Yes or no? The calculator's doing all the math. What you need to focus on is conceptually what's occurring, okay? So let's just see what we get as our solution. You get 1,448,054.71. So what we're really saying is that $10,000 a month for the next 180 months, while yes, it actually is cash money of 1.8 million, we're saying that in today's dollars, it's really only worth 1.4 million. Okay? Now, if we chose to assign less risk to this, just as an example, right below this, don't change anything other than the interest rate. So go down to 1% as the interest rate. You don't have to put everything back in, just continue where you left off. Put in 1%, resolve for the present value. $1.6 million. Okay, now let's go to the extreme. 0%. So we're basically saying there's no risk, no decline, no discounting, and voila, we have our 1.8 million. okay? So
Where does the interest come in at? Like, who's paying the interest? Like, you're
it's
just
not,
getting
it's
a payment.
it's opportunity cost, okay? So in other words, what else could we be doing with that money, you know, over that time period? That if we were to make the decision to actually invest this amount of money at some sort of an interest rate of, let's say, 3%, then that would equivalent to this dollar amount. But what we're doing is just simply, we're trying to adjust it for that time that it's taking us to actually receive that money. So it's the lost sort of opportunity cost.
So is there like a real calculation that goes into finding that, or is that?
Yeah, well, it depends on what your other alternatives are for investing that money,
Gotcha.
okay? And what inflation is, you know, and a whole number of things. Because let's just say inflation is 3% a year. Well, that right there, you're losing that just off the top.
Yeah.
Because that money is not worth, you know, as much to you now because inflation is hit and that money is worth less at some point in the future.
Okay. So if you looked at this problem, like for example, like it's $1.8 million. So if I'm like the real estate owner and I own this house and someone's paying me rent of $10,000 a month and I fall under some kind of duress and need the money, if someone came up to me and said, "Hi, I'm willing to like buy you out of this contract for the next, you know, 180
Right.
months," I would take no less than $1,448,000. Got it.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
Okay? All right. Let's move forward. Okay, and the next example type, the following page, page 3.21, determining a series of equal payments necessary to amortize a present value. Big fancy words to basically say calculating a mortgage payment. Okay? All right. So determining a series of equal payments necessary to amortize a present value. Okay, so as I said, this is just another nice set of words to basically describe a car payment situation, mortgage payment, that sort of thing. All right, so let's make this monthly. So 12 payments per year. Everything out. Okay, so in this scenario, let's just sort of look at what this kind of looks like in terms of kind of a timeline situation. All right, first of all, how many years do we want to make it?
6 years.
6 years. Okay, and but it's going to be monthly, so that is going to be 6 times 12, or what, 72 payments? Okay, all right. Now, what interest rate are we going to have?
3.9.
3.9. Sounds like a car loan. All right, 3.9% interest. Okay, so we're going to put in over here 6, shift in for 72 months. We're going to put in 3.9 as our interest rate on this loan. All right. Now what we're wanting to solve for, what is the payment each and every month that we need to make? But we first of all need to know, well, what is the car loan, or what is the home value or the mortgage value? So give me a dollar amount.
100,000.
That's a really expensive car. Okay, $100,000 for this car. All right. 100,000 is going to be our present value, and so what we're going to be solving for is what is the monthly payment for that. Okay.
So that's a present value because like technically you have to pay up front, but you're just taking a loan.
Yes. So you've got $100,000 as the present value, but you are making payments on that for 72 months. Okay, make sense? All right. So for this car loan, you've got expensive taste. All right.
How much
Has
does
to
this
be a
cost?
Mercedes.
Okay, so 72 months, 3.9% interest, $100,000. Okay, our payment on this car, $1,550. $59.97 rounded, okay? So that would be the dollar amount each month that we would have to pay for that car loan, okay? Is everybody clear with that, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay? All right, any questions? Okay, that one went by without a hitch, okay. Apparently people can relate to car loans, okay, yeah.
Explain to me more what
Okay, so, all right, good question. So the question is, what is amortization? Amortization is basically being able to determine what are going to be your monthly payment, but also your principal and your interest components of that payment. And so it's something we're going to get into a little bit later, where we will actually use the calculator to show for any given month, we can show you what the principal portion of that payment is and what the interest portion is, and then over time. An amortization schedule is where you get from a bank or from a lender, from the car dealership or whatever, and they would simply say, okay, for the next 72 months, line item by line item, here is your monthly payment, here's what portion is going to pay down principal, here is the portion that's just simply interest on that payment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna do some examples of that later. All right. Moving forward. All right, that one's pretty straightforward. Okay. Okay, now let's take, okay, skip forward to page 328. In this case, calculating the internal rate of return of a single amount received. Okay, calculating the internal rate of return or interest rate for a single amount received. All right, so in this case, it's going to be a situation of where we have our little timeline. We're going to have our present value over here. We're going to have our future value up here. We're going to have our term or in down here. But what we're solving for in this case is we're going to be solving for what is the interest rate. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, or the internal rate of return for a single amount. Okay, so let's just sort of start ourselves off. Now, from a real estate perspective, this could very well be the classic situation of we bought a property here for this price, we sell it for this price, we held it for this long. What was the rate of return that we generated off of that real estate property? Does that make sense? Okay. So, you want this to be monthly or annual?
Monthly.
Monthly. All right. So 12 payments per year. Okay. Clear everything out. All right. So, how much do we want to have bought this property for? $250,000 is going to be our investment in this property. So we're going to make that
Present value.
our present value and make it a negative number because that's money we are spending. So $250,000 is what we are spending on this investment here at time period 0. Okay. How long are we going to hold it? How many years or months? 5 years, what I'm hearing. Okay, so 5 years or 60 months. 5 times 12 is 60. All right, so 5 years is our holding period. All right, how much do we anticipate that we're going to sell it for at the end of that 5 years?
375,000.
How much?
375.
375,000. Okay, so we're putting 375,000 as our future value. Now we simply solve for the interest rate or the internal rate of return. So what we're solving for once again here is our interest rate. Now, if you put all of this in and you get a no solution, the reason you're getting a no solution is because one of these two numbers has to be a negative number, because the calculator looks at everything as inflows and outflows. So everything has to match. So it's kind of like in the accounting, sort of debits and credits. You know, you gotta obviously balance out. So in this case, the 250,000 is the amount that we're paying. So that's a negative number. And then the amount that we're receiving is the 350 or 375,000. All right. So let's see what we get. So 8.14% rounded would be our internal rate of return or rate of return for this particular real estate investment. Okay, is everybody following me on that? Yes or no? Okay, now one thing I like to do here, just to kind of illustrate the point, I'm going to use a little bit of a different example just because I want to illustrate a point. All right. How many times have you heard people make the comment, I bought the property for $100,000 and then I doubled my money and sold it for $200,000, so I made a 100% rate of return? Okay, well, that can be true, but they would have had to have owned it for 1 year and 1 year only. Okay, so let me explain what I'm sort of saying here. So we change our scenario here. They bought it for $100,000, they're selling it for $200,000, and if the term is only 1 year, all right, then what let's just put it in. So we're going to make this one payment per year or annual. So one payment per year, clear everything out, put in the 100,000 as a negative present value, the 200,000 as a positive future value for 1 year, and then solve for the rate of return or the interest rate. So let's just see if what I just told you holds true. And lo and behold, yes, we made a 100% rate of return. Okay, but that's making the assumption that we only had to hold it for 1 year. Okay, now could we have made the return higher than that? Yeah, if we sold it for less than a year. If you bought it today and you sold it literally tomorrow, your return would be ridiculously high, because the assumption is if you could do that every single day over the course of the year, your return would be ridiculous, okay? But most of the time what we try to do with returns is we try to annualize them, because that's how we think of in terms of how we sort of make it make sense to us, is we annualize returns. So just as an example, if we held it for 2 years, so see what happens. All you do is just change the term, and resolve. Well, it's not quite 50%, it's actually 41.42. Well, the reason for that is because of, once again, kind of the time value of money and the discounting effect, okay? Well, let's say that we hold it for 10 years. $7.177%. Well, that doesn't seem all that great. So once again, just to keep that in perspective, think about all these people that own land. Okay, and they always, that's usually the example that's given is, I've owned this land for 25 years, and I bought it for this bargain price of $100,000, and then 10 years later I sold it for $200,000. And they're thinking, whoa, I doubled my money, and the reality is no, 7% rate of return. Okay, and it's probably worse than that because you have holding costs. During that 10 years, you've got to pay property taxes. You may or may not have to pay insurance on the raw land. in the event somebody gets hurt or whatever on the land. But the point being is, it's not exactly a 100% rate of return. So this is where and why, you know, developers and real estate investors are so adamant about doing projects as quickly as they possibly can, not only just from the construction phase, but also, you know, in terms of holding the units in inventory, you know, before they actually get sold, because the longer they hold them, their return just keeps shrinking, okay? Unless you've got a compounding effect of the market is going up in value, you know, while that's taking place, okay? So if you get an increasing market, well, it may actually behoove you to hold on to the units a little bit longer and wait until the market prices rise, but very seldom is that really going to be the motivation. Okay, moving forward. Okay, the next one, on the next page, 3.29, calculating the IRR of an annuity plus a single amount received.
I was thinking, can you just touch on like an internal rate of return versus an overall rate of return?
It really is the same thing.
Okay.
The internal rate of, there are a lot of different words that get used to express the interest rate. And they all mean slightly different things, and we don't want to get too bogged down in it. But interest rate, you can refer to an interest rate as a growth rate. You can refer to it as a discount rate. You can refer to it as a compounding rate. You can refer to it as an internal rate of return. You can refer to it as a yield. You could refer to it as, oh geez, I'm sure there's some others I'm leaving out. But it's basically, it's all, in essence, the same thing. It's about something dealing with the percentage rate of return or interest rate or some variation thereof. Now, each one of those does mean something specific and unique, but it's all about just, from a calculation perspective, dealing with some sort of percentage rate of return or compounding rate or discount rate. Okay? Okay, so calculating the IRR of an annuity. Plus a single amount received. All right. So in this particular case, what we're doing is we're saying, all right, we've made an investment in whatever it is, a piece of real estate, piece of equipment, and so we've spent some money up front for that piece of equipment, for that real estate, and then it's going to be generating income for several years into the future, and we want to know what sort of a rate of return is that to us if we've made that sort of an investment. Okay, so it's a kind of a classic sort of investment setup. So in this case, let's just sort of show you what we're talking about. Okay, how many years? Give me a term.
23 years.
20 years. You say 23?
23.
You like the odd years, don't you? Okay, actually prime numbers even. Okay, 17 and 23. Okay. All right. Now, okay, so that's a term. In this case, so what sort of dollar amount are we talking about up front that we're going to pay for this? $125,000 is what we're going to pay for it. All right? And will this monthly or annual? Annual. All right. So one payment per year. Clear everything out. All right. Now, $125,000 is going to be our cash outflow, or our, in this case, our present value, what we spent. All right, and it's going to be for 23 years. Okay, so this is annual, so it's actually 23 total. All right, now, what dollar amount are we going to generate in income each year of the 23 years that we want to calculate a return on. Now, I'm going to stop you here before you give me an answer, because you can give me any number, but realize if you don't give me enough of a number, it's going to be a negative number, which is fine. If you give me, a really big number, it's going to be a huge, sort of rate of return. So let's just see how close we can kind of maybe get, but let's just think about it like this. If we're spending $125,000, and we're getting a rate of return over 23 years, just to kind of do some basic math, that means to break even with no compounding or discounting or anything like that, we would need to generate about $5,434 each year to basically break even, okay, in terms of no real rate of return, just break even. Is everybody with me on that, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, so now I'm asking you, what dollar amount do we want this project to generate each and every year?
8,500.
8,500, I like the way. Okay. 8,500, nice, good, positive number. All right, so that's going to be the case, $8,500 a year for each of the 23 years. Okay, so we're simply going to put in 8,500 as our payment amount, and that's going to be a positive number because that's money we're receiving as rent or income. And then we're going to simply solve for our rate of return or interest rate. All right, so I get 4.103%, all right, as our rate of return on that investment. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no? Now, this is not an overly realistic example of a real estate asset because, why? There's no future value here. In other words, there's no reversion, there's no sale price. This is basically making the assumption that you're buying something and it generates this $8,500 a year for 23 years, and then all of a sudden is worth zero. Does that make sense? Okay, so to make this a more realistic sort of real estate example, you would sort of say, okay, here at that end of that 23rd year, we're going to sell it for something. Now, what we sell it for could just be what we paid for it, $125,000. Could be less because we haven't done a good job of maintaining it. Could be worth more because we've done an excellent job of maintaining it. Okay, so give me a number that we want to put in as future value.
200,000.
Okay, 200,000. Now, before we go any further, what do you think that is going to do to our rate of return?
Make it greater.
If that's the only other thing we're adding, it's going to make it greater. Okay? So all we're going to do is we're going to put in 200,000 as our future value, resolve for the interest rate, and that kicked us up to 7.81%. Okay? You're saying, well, it doesn't seem like it's a whole lot for getting, $200,000. Well, at $200,000, when is it occurring? 23 years from now. Okay? So it's not worth a lot to us today, in today's dollars, especially whenever, we're looking at that long of a time span. Okay, yep.
Where's our discount rate?
Well, you're calculating it.
Yeah, no. I'm saying for the 200,000.
No, it's lumping everything together, so everything is being discounted back to the 125,000. So what we're saying here, let me make sure that everyone is clear. If we're spending $125,000 on this investment, and it generates $8,500 a year for 23 years, and at the end of that 23 years, we sell it for $200,000. So I'm sorry, yeah, 200,000.
Okay.
Then our rate of return on that 125,000 is 7.81%.
I thought it's like if you set it up in an IRA table,
Yep.
right?
Okay. Other questions? Yep.
Okay, so just to see if I'm getting this correct. So you put out 125,000, right? You're earning money on
Monthly or annual rent.
you're earning annual income,
Oh.
which is then of the $8,500.
Which that by itself, with no reversion, gives you a 4% return on your money.
Okay.
But then now by adding in the $200,000
Future
reversion or sale price at the end of 23 years, bumps all of it up to a 7.8% rate of return.
But would it not only, it's only bumping up,
No, it's everything. It's bumping up everything.
it's not minusing out the 125 to say that's not,
No, the 125 is simply, that is a fixed number, as is the 8,500. All we're really doing here is we're sort of incrementally adding additional income to this. So what was simply a base income just off of the operating income on the property, it was a 4.1%, but by adding in that incremental or additional income of the sale price 23 years from now, that is simply saying we are getting overall a 7.8% return. Now, the difference between this and this is reflective of the impact of the 200,000.
okay.
Yes, sir.
Just for like the quiz, when we work this problem out, like you just did an example, so like we would normally put the future value, we do the future value then solve for the for the interest rate, or do we have to get the original interest rate and then put it would be the same thing, right?
Yeah.
I was just making sure.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on that? All right. Moving forward. Are you saying that I could be tricky?
No, I'm trying to put it on the
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Well, actually, so the very next page, 3.3, just did what I just did, which is simply calculating the internal rate of return of an annuity plus a single amount received, which would be that future value. Okay?
If that, what you sold it for was less than the initial pay-in,
Mhm.
does it increase or decrease your,
So it would decrease, well, okay. Like, for example, if we had had something less than 200,000, like 100,000,
less
let's
than
say.
125,000, yeah.
Well, what it would do is it would lower this return from 7.81 to something less than 7.81, but still greater than 4.1.
Okay. Because you still sold it, even though you sold it less than what you paid for it.
Right.
In that, you can't take into consideration like additional factors like an inflationary or perceived risk, right?
Well, I mean, in the sense of you could simply say that part of this rate of return reflects some sort of an inflationary hedge. I mean, in other words, a component part of this you simply would subtract out and say, we need to get 2% a year for inflation. So,
Oh, at the end, you
Right.
just subtracted that.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
okay, all right.
What's the difference? Are we just doing one on 3.3?
It's just that we're adding in the reversion, the 200,000.
Oh, okay.
Nope. Okay. All right. Okay, moving on. Let's see. Okay, we got that. Look at that. Okay, so it looks like what we need to do then is to do a calculating an internal rate of return with variable cash flows. What page is that? 3.32. Okay. So this begins to, once again, get us a little bit closer to reality, which is to say that if you own a piece of real estate, there's a very good chance that the income that you receive from one year to the next is going to be different. Okay? Now, it may be different because the rent rate changes, could be different because of occupancy levels, could be different because your expenses go up or down. So there's a variety of reasons as to why the income on a property could vary from one year to the next. But suffice it to say that in many instances that just simply occurs, okay? Because even if you own a rental house, something as simple as a rental house, what could happen? You have to do repairs one year, and the next year you don't. You have to maybe deal with a change in your property taxes, or a change in your insurance costs, or a change in property management fees. All those sorts of things. So in other words, my point is simply that the income that the property generates can go up, it can go down from one year to the next in terms of ownership. Okay, everybody cool with that? So we need to have a way of being able to use that information and then calculate a rate of return accordingly. All right, so let's just start. We're going to work an annual problem. All right, so one payment per year. All right, so let's just start with how much did we buy the property for here at time period 0? Now, how many years? Probably the shorter period is better.
5.
5 years, okay. All right, 5 years, just simply because we can kind of see the numbers. All right. All right, so for this property, first of all, we're going to ask the question, how much did we spend on the property? How much did we pay for it? $300,000. So $300,000 is what we paid for it. Okay? Everybody cool with that? Okay? Now, at the end of each year, okay, we're going to receive a rental payment or an income payment off of that property. Now, this gets back to kind of Chase's earlier point about this whole monthly versus annual and that sort of thing. Okay, so in many instances, what we tend to do is even though we are collecting rent payments maybe every single month, we roll it up at the end of the year to just sort of say, okay, here's the total rent we collected for the year, and subtract out all of our expenses and so forth, and here is our final sort of net operating income number on the property. Okay, does that make sense? So that's kind of the number we're going to pop in here. All right, so give me an income number.
90,000.
90,000. Ooh.
Really good.
I like your kind of investments. Okay, all right. 90,000 is going to be the income off of that first year. All right, second year. It's not going to be 90,000. Something higher or lower?
115.
70,000. I heard. Okay. I heard. What was your number?
115.
115. Okay. Then let's say it goes down substantially in the fourth year. Brandon, give me a number. 20,000.
Wow.
All right. And year 5, give me a number. 40,000. Okay. Yeah, it's a weird one. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but the whole idea, it's variable cash flows. So the idea, each year, the income that you receive off of it is different. Okay, is everybody cool with that? Now, we can also throw in at the end, if this is indeed a real estate investment, some sort of a reversion here at the end. Or in other words, a sale price of the property at the end. So what do we think we want to sell it for? And it could be a number higher or lower than 300,000.
250,000.
Okay, that's counterintuitive, but I like the what the heck.
Well, it's going down in the cash flow, so it's not going to be valued as much.
Yeah, but those are high cash flows.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So here's what we've really got. If we kind of look at this 1 year after another, is we've got a negative 300,000 here in this first year. We've got a positive 90, 70, 115, 20, 40,000 here, but we've got to add in that reversion or sale price of the 250, so the net is going to be 290,000 in that final year. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no? Okay? All right. So now we put it into the calculator. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clear everything out just to make sure everything's out of there. All right, now we're going to access a new function on the calculator, which is the cash flow function. All right, so you're going to type in 300,000. You're going to change the sign to negative, and then you're going to hit a brand new key on the calculator. Cash flow sub J. Okay, now let's take a look at the calculator so you can locate the key. It is third row, third column, CF sub J. Everybody see it? Okay, what this is doing is this is saying we're going to be entering a series of cash flows, either yearly or annually or either yearly or monthly or some other sort of time frame, and then use that to then be able to calculate what our rate of return is. So we put the 300,000 in as cash flow for time period 0. Okay? Whenever you put it in, it should say in your display, real briefly, CF0. Does it? After you put in the 300,000 plus minus CFJ, it should say CF0. Okay, then you're going to put the 90,000 in, hit the cash flow, and it's going to come up CF1 for cash flow for period 1. Then the 70,000 cash flow, that'll be for year 2 or period 2. 115 as the cash flow for year 3. 20,000 cash flow for year 4. And then finally, the combined 290,000 cash flow for year 5. Okay? Does that make sense? Yes or no? So all we've done is just simply put those in to the calculator as cash flows. All right? At this point, all we need to do to solve for our answer is simply say shift. And now we're going to access another key, the internal rate of return per year. Okay? So on your calculator, underneath the CST button, which is second row, third column, CST. Underneath that is IRR/year. All right? So whenever you do that, we should get our rate of return. Okay?
Yeah, if it's on a service building for a year.
Yeah, no, that could be it.
Okay? I get 22.06% as our rate of return. Okay? And all your calculator is doing, in essence, is it's taking each one of these sort of individually and collectively and sort of saying, okay, what is the rate of return on that original $300,000 effectively averaged over that 5-year holding period? Okay? So while you are not specifically getting 22% in actuality in each year over the life of the investment, from the time that you cash in to when you cash out, your average rate of return would be 22%. Does that make sense? Okay? Because we can calculate and say, okay, if you get $90,000 that first year, 90,000 divided by 300,000, that's a 30% rate of return. Okay, just in that first year. But you also notice that goes down, goes up, then goes way down, okay, and then goes and down again, and you're selling it for less than what you paid for it. So all things taken together, that's where you end up with the 22% overall rate of return. Make sense? Okay. Now hopefully you don't have a property that performs quite that erratically, but you know, it could happen. It could happen.
This is the same thing we just did, except with the variable
Yes.
input.
Yeah, that's the only difference. It's just that we're just simply saying that the payments that we're receiving are changing each and every year. Okay? All right. Any questions on that? Now, let's tweak it just a little bit. And do I want to do it that way or do I want to do it another way? I want to do it another way. I want to be less confusing. Okay. Okay. So let's do this. Let's, it may actually be the next example. Let me just sit here. Yeah, actually it pretty much is going to be probably the next example. Where we want to calculate what is the amount we should pay for the investment. All right, so let's do this. Let's say we've got another 5-year investment. All right, and just for simplicity, let's say we've got $100,000 that we paid for this investment here at time period 0. Oh, no, actually, let's not do that. Let me back up. Let me back up. We want to figure out what it's worth here at time period 0. All right, and so for each year, we've got income coming off of it that's going to change each and every year. So give me our first year worth of income.
15,000.
15,000. Second year of income.
40,000.
40,000. Okay, my third year of income.
55,000.
55,000. Okay, it should go down. Let's say what the heck. Brandon, give me another low number.
20,000.
You like 20,000. You're a man of consistency. Okay. All right. And then our final year, 5th year.
5,000.
5,000. All right. And what do we want to sell this thing for?
250.
Okay, we want to sell it for 300,000. Okay. So now the setup is a little bit different. The setup here, instead of calculating a rate of return, we want to calculate how much is this thing worth to us. But in order to calculate how much it's worth to us, we have to know what sort of rate of return that we want or expect off of this. So here's, this will sort of help to frame this a little bit better. Most investors, whenever they go into a deal, they set what is referred to as a hurdle rate. In other words, think about it like in track, you know, you're jumping over a hurdle, okay? All right, so in this case, most investors are going to say, we have a minimum hurdle or a minimum rate of return that we want to achieve on whatever investments that we do, okay? Could be 10%, could be 15, could be 20, could be 30. You know, it all depends on their own sort of expectations of what they want to receive, which could be predicated on what their cost of borrowing is, or just what sort of other opportunity costs that they have or available to. So, what sort of hurdle rate do we want to set for this particular investor?
12.
12%. All right. So now, what we're going to do is we're going to solve for basically how much can they pay for this investment and get themselves a 12% rate of return. Everybody cool with that? All right. So let's show you how you would set this up. Okay. So one payment per year. Okay. Now, this is also going to be a cash flow function, but watch what I do. 0 is going to be that first cash flow at time period 0, because we want to know how much we're going to pay for it, but we need to reserve that spot in the calculator saying, all right, this is happening at time period 0. So we put a 0 in there. Then we put in the 15,000. $40,000. $55,000. $20,000. And then $305,000 for that last year. Okay. Then we're going to put in 12% as our interest rate. Then we're going to solve for net present value. Okay? Now your net present value key on the calculator is second row, fourth column underneath the PRC key. You see NPV in orange letters. Okay? So that is simply going to calculate what is the value of the investment. Okay? So let's just go ahead and put this in real quick. Okay, I get 270,000, 204, and 08 rounded. Okay, now, before we go any further, let's step back for a second and just try to understand the logic here, okay? So, do ourselves a favor and sort of add together, excuse me, add together all of our cash flows here. Just do a simple addition. Nothing complicated, just a simple addition. So 15,000 plus 40,000 plus 55,000 plus 20,000 plus 305,000. So total combined $435,000. Okay, everybody with me? Anybody not? Okay, so what that represents is total income that we're receiving off of this investment is $435,000. How much are we spending to get that? $270,000. Okay, so why is this so much greater? Because we're demanding a 12% annualized return on our investment. Does that make sense? Now, the part that will make this coalesce in your mind is as we begin to adjust this interest rate, you will see this number get closer and as a matter of fact, match up with this number. Okay? You'll see what I mean. Follow me a little bit here. So let's say instead of a 12% hurdle rate, we only wanted a 5% hurdle rate. Okay, so we put in 5%, solve for MPV. Of course, I was an idiot and I erased everything, so I'm going to put it all back in myself. Okay. So 5% NPV would be 353, 507, 49. Okay, so we're getting closer because we're not discounting as much, we're not requiring as much of a rate of return from those future cash flows. Let's say that we go all the way down to a 0% interest rate or hurdle rate, and then solve for NPV. Lo and behold, there it is. Matches. Okay? Because what we're saying is, if we don't demand any sort of a rate of return, in other words, we have a 0% hurdle rate, but all we're concerned about is just getting back our money, period, no additional payment for or compensation for the amount of time or the risk or anything else, then we would simply be happy with getting back the money and we'll get a 0% rate of return or hurdle rate. Makes sense, everybody? Yes or no? Now, one more point to this is, well, what if you actually went down and you said, well, I'm happy with a negative 5%. You would never be happy with that. But let's just say you put in a 5% negative. We'll change the sign. Actually, that'll be an easier way to do that. So, oops. All right, 5% negative interest rate, and then let's see what happens with our net present value. 5% change sign, interest rate, all for net present value. So we would never want that to happen. I mean, but the point being is it just sort of illustrates the concept that if we were to pay more than the $435,000 for this investment, we would actually be generating a negative hurdle rate for ourselves, or a negative rate of return. And in this case, 5% negative would result in us being willing to pay $542,000, which we would never ever want to do, because that would be a negative rate of return for us. Okay. Now, the simple explanation of this, for this particular investment, listen to my words, where the net present value is equal to, or I'm sorry, where the internal rate of return is 0, okay, if the internal rate of return is 0, then that basically is just simply saying that that is the actual cash flow from the deal, okay? But in the event that we are calculating the internal rate of return, which we're going to do here in a minute, then what we're going to do is we're going to look at the maximum amount that we can spend for an investment, but then get an incremental return on top of that. Let me explain how we're going to get there. Okay, so right now, just focus on what we have done at this point.
So where IRR is 0, the MPV is equal.
Well, whenever MPV is 0, that is your IRR.
There you go.
Got it.
You got it.
If your MPV is 0, that is your IRR. Okay. All right. Let's see what else we got. I think all the rest of these. Okay, one little thing, we're going to do the quiz here in a little bit. Sometimes in some problems, you're going to be given more information than what you need, okay, on purpose. Okay, and so you simply just need to make sure you read the problems. I think in this particular quiz, there's only one instance of where that exists, and it's on the lottery question problem, all right? And because what I've done is basically your quiz is 15 questions, and it's taken, all I've done is change the numbers from the problems that are in your handout, okay? So it should be pretty straightforward for you to be able to pull 100% on this quiz, but just realize that, yeah, there are maybe a couple of little minor tricks that have been sort of thrown in there, but hopefully nothing major, okay? So I think we're pretty much at that point where we can do one more.
I know, it never works out that way.
Let me make sure there's nothing else
And everyone, can we take a little break? Where's everyone?
Hold on.
Actually, no, I don't think it's being hit off.
I think we're good. I think we got.
I just need to stop.
No, I'm just making sure that I didn't leave anything out. I think I've covered everything that we need to cover. Okay. Yep, I'm good. All right. So, you want to do the quiz now, or you want to take a quick little break? Okay, quick little break. And by a quick little break, I mean like 5-minute break. Okay, not a 20-30-minute break. Right. I did, yeah. T-bars is basically what I'm doing here. With these things, same thing.
So like, for this one, how should I do this? Like, what is yield? For 3 years?
For years.
Yeah, let's go.
What you done? You started to call the dog
Trying to figure out where, where do you, okay, think about it in the perspective of what's am I thinking about it?
Good, good. No, no.
Or I'm trying to think about it, so am I talking about the working kingdom? Correct. So you're always like, it's always going to be the construction class, which is on your.
Yep.
If you're giving
Yep,
money.
and probably need to do it, I think this weekend, so I think enrollment completely shuts down,
Always gonna be positive. So,
maybe
the question reads,
you should be able to do something.
Of course, it goes just to RE.
It should be, I think 5865 is the construction.
any payment is negative, really, unless it's a payment received by income. Yeah.
What asset class? Yeah, are you like industrial, office?
Are you in the law class?
Okay.
You in the next class? You took that already?
I do.
That's what got you started?
That's my very first class.
You probably were like,
You did extremely well.
you had to be excited about that one, dude.
As a lawyer, I would hope so.
That's my wheelhouse.
I understand, I get it, I get it. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. Sure. Oh, you just add that. Yeah, you're just adding that to the final cash flow, so instead of 40,000, that's 290. This is, we're just saving 40,000 from the income, but then you're selling the property for 250. Correct, correct. Yep, yeah, that's why you're gonna be off. Yep.
Yeah, I did. I had to get acceptance to get into the fifth class. Why are they blocking you on the fifth class registration for full-time students?
You need to talk to your advisor and just get an override.
Yeah, I mean, I did that. I'm just.
Well, because technically, most students take 12, and that's the kind of the maximum they've set, but our students are weird. So
Okay.
we're the only program in the college that does it that way.
She has got that to you?
But you don't have to do it right now, because you can register for winter too. Wait until.
You can do that later, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's what I thought. That's the button.
As long as you're, okay, as long as you're registered for this
Yeah, I got
class,
my
the law
whole
class,
course
and for the Argus class, you're good. You can wait and register for Dev 1 and the construction class later.
It wasn't even her, she called me.
Yeah, obviously it's good to do it in a second. Like, I don't know why they hold it to do it. Like, don't you want my extra? Of course they
Yours or-
They're making it hard to
Okay, no, it's somewhere.
Yeah.
I think I just gave it the last one.
I'm using the laptop, right?
I'm sorry?
Digital one.
Yeah, you can use the laptop.
Where did you find that? Oh my god, I was like, where is it?
Okay, make sure you go ahead and put your name on the answer sheet. Put your name on the answer sheet. Okay, we'll wait another minute or two for, we're gonna wait until 10 after, and then I'll pass out the quiz. Yep, yep. But, well, they're longer quizzes, so in essence, it's still the same number of questions.
Yeah, but each quiz is more valuable.
Yeah.
Oh.
So how's it been so far?
5 minutes.
Yeah. That's my first time. So I'm like,
Okay, so we're almost, yeah, we still got it. All right, so here's the way this is going to work. We're going to do the quiz. You're going to take a little break after that. For those of you that finish early, for those of you that take a long time, you won't get a break, okay? And so as soon as pretty much the last couple of people are here, and I'll rush them along and then scoot them out, then we will come back for the second part of the class, which will be starting on basically handout number 2, okay? We're not going to finish every little detail with handout 2 today. Well, we might, you never know. We'll just sort of see time-wise how we do on this, okay? All right, so once again, this is 15 questions. You're only going to answer, obviously, on the quiz 1 portion. And when you're done, bring it up and turn it in, and we'll go from there. Okay, here we go. And once again, the quiz is open book, open notes, open computer, you know. But here's the thing: you don't have an unlimited amount of time on this. Okay, so whenever it gets to be the last 2 or 3 people, we're closing it down. You're not gonna get 2 hours on this quiz. You're gonna get at the most probably 30 to 45 minutes. Okay, so just bank on that. Because at some point, you either know it or you don't, you know, and you're not going to be able to basically spend the time looking through every little detail. Sorry. Yep, we're right on here.
Dead, done. Me and my brother.
You didn't know it was coming. You didn't know.
My mom was like, it's a funny when you go away to school for the family. You get to start school. And then I said, you know, I didn't come back with him. You see life?
Yeah.
Usually I stay behind. But this year I just didn't.
You do that here.
Yes.
You do like
No,
every year?
actually, right after that, I went and helped.
You can, I'll use it.
just to be clear, so no one's confused, on question number 11, the carrying cost per year, that's a negative number, which means that's an expense or a negative payment. Looks like most everybody's about the same place, so let's just say about 15 more minutes. That'll be easy enough. So 11 o'clock. So of the 7 people that have turned it in so far, everyone has gotten a 14 except for one person, and they've all missed different questions. So 14 out of 15 questions they've gotten right. So no one's got a perfect score yet. I'm holding out hope. Okay, 5 more minutes. Okay, start putting the finishing touches on that. We need to finish this thing up. Just missed one little tiny thing. Oh. Oh. Okay, have I got all of them? Okay, wrap this thing up right now. Yes, please. No. I'll figure it out.
You'll understand based on the handwriting.
Oh, okay. All right, we got all of them?
No.
Okay, we're gonna get started at 10 after. Good, that it? Final last call.
The NPV was below.
So we're starting in 4 minutes, 3 minutes.
7:14, and I saw for do you have another third one, or not less than the initial?
I don't think I do.
Alright,
Let's see about the last one.
it's on, you emailed it, right?
Yeah.
That's fine, never mind.
Okay, let's get everybody back in here.
I just saw for all.
Okay, let's go.
Just the same,
I figured you know what?
I did everything.
It's the overthinking.
Actually, I didn't see it. I was like running. It was like, oh, I'm moving too fast. So I redid it. I don't know.
Anybody get a beer?
Yeah. All the time.
What'd you get for the last?
I know.
It was an NPV question.
All you do is put the interest rate in 14%, solve for NPV, done.
Did you need that, so I didn't have it.
That was the, yeah, the one before that was the one that you had to think like.
The last one, no, something about the last one was weird, right?
Right. Yeah, so just.
Yeah, I didn't put the interest rate.
Okay. I think it's supposed to be now. Maybe I put the.
But you need to do that in cash flow.
Because that's.
You did it cash flow.
And then.
You have to add that interest rate. Then you solve for it.
Was that email, was that emailed or is it on?
I didn't add it.
It was emailed.
That's not that was
I
I don't think so, I just emailed everybody.
the question before.
Then the next one is the number, handout number 2.
I was thinking about
That's what they wanted to return
You had lots of barbecue yesterday? Did you have barbecue yesterday?
No.
Did you go to the event?
No, I never go.
You don't go? Just go spirit.
Okay, I'm usually not here.
Yeah.
Okay, this time we get started.
I mean, it was a good
The rest of the campers back in here. Okay, let's go. Let's start.
You could have won a car. Or someone wanted to use for.
I like your smile. Oh, this one is for sure.
Whoa.
This one. Explain it. Describe your That's what I thought. I know he did.
Why did you put in there? The value? Did you? I can understand why. Yeah, that would mess it up.
All right.
Because what I did to you, I didn't.
Okay, so handout number 2, this basically walks us through the income statement for real estate properties. All right, let's get started. So what we're going to do is just develop basically typical sort of income statements for income producing property, kind of walk our way through the income statement. Now, the terminology that I tend to use is only slightly different than the terminology that they use in their handout. So I'm going to kind of explain the differences real quick. Okay. My first initial line item I call potential gross income, PGI. They refer to it as potential rental income. Same thing, okay? It's just the maximum dollar revenue that you're going to bring in on the property. We'll get back to that here in a second. Okay, the second line, we match up vacancies and collection losses, all right? We'll just explain these as we go through them. That'll probably just be easier. Okay, so starting off with potential gross income, when you've got an income producing property, this is the maximum annual, typically annual income the property can generate if fully occupied, fully leased, period. So let's just make the assumption that we've got a little income producing property, maybe an apartment complex, and just for simplicity's sake, how many units do we have in this apartment complex? 10. Okay, 10 units. All right, and let's assume that they're all generating the same monthly rent, so give me a monthly rent number.
1,500.
1,500 a month. All right. Okay, so let's just start with that. All right, so that's going to be 1,500 times 12 to get an annual rent per unit of 18,000 annual rent per unit. Okay, and we've got 10 units. All right, so times 10, 180,000, and that would be our potential rental income for that property. Does that make sense, everybody? Yes or no? Okay. Now, we'll kind of work through it. We're going to make some adjustments as we kind of go along. Okay, vacancies and collection losses. All right, difference between a vacancy and a collection loss is as follows. A vacancy is where obviously the unit is not occupied, okay? Whereas a collection loss is the unit is occupied, but you've got a deadbeat tenant not paying the rent, okay? Simple as that. That's the difference between the vacancy and the collection loss. In both instances, you're not receiving income, okay? It's just that you've got a bigger problem if you've got a collection loss because you've got somebody in there that's not paying rent that you've got to get rid of and deal with, all right? So in this case, what do we want that vacancy and collection loss to be?
5% of PGI.
5% of PGI, okay. You had to go with something other than 10%, okay, so, make sure I don't screw it up, okay, $9,000. Okay, so 9,000 is going to be our vacancy and collection loss. Now, in the materials, or the handout that I gave you, they actually do another little calculation, which I don't typically do, which is what they call effective rental income, which is simply be taking the 180 minus the 9,000 to give you effective rental income. I typically skip over that and then just go directly to other income, all right? Now, other income is anything that I would sort of define as being other than traditional rental income. So this could be things like parking garage fees, could be vending machines, could be coin-operated laundry machines, could be signage that you've got on the outside of the building, could be what somebody valet parking. Okay, so pretty much anything that is not really directly tied to the rental unit itself. All right, so other income, give me a number per year.
10,000.
10,000. All right, so in this case, to get now what they call gross